Now, you're among a list of others who have also been questioned in a similar fashion at the airport in recent weeks. Were you surprised when it happened to you?
I was fairly surprised. I thought there was some possibility. The reason I thought there might be some possibility is because of the Israeli law that says that people can be barred from entering the country if they boycott Israel or any part of Israel. And since I have publicly advocated not buying products from the settlements in the West Bank, I thought that might be a reason for them to, detain me. But actually, that wasn't what they asked me about at all.
Right. We understand that they questioned you about a protest that you attended in Hebron the last time that you visited Israel. What do the increasing amount of incidents like this say to you about the Prime Minister's concerns right now?
It strikes me that there's something very insecure about a country that's trying to prevent people from coming and peacefully protesting, and it reflects a lack of appreciation of democratic values. I worry that that's happening in my own country, and I worry that it's happening here. If somebody threatens violence against Israel, of course they should be given extra scrutiny, but to detain people simply because they have political views or they're going to protest peacefully, what happened to me was very, very minor. But this kind of thing happens in a much, much more aggressive way to many people who don't have the same kind of privileges that I do because they're not American or they're not Jewish, especially if they're Palestinian or Arab or Muslim. And I don't think that's the way a democracy should behave.
All right, judging from the outside, not living in Israel yourself with the daily fears, I suppose, that Israelis live with, where do you feel these insecurities, as you put them, come from?
Look, there are genuine things for Israelis to be afraid of. I totally understand that. Israel has fought many wars. It still faces terrorist attacks. But I think that the Netanyahu government has exploited those fears to create to try to crack down on opposition, on dissent, in a whole range of ways. And in this way, he is really very similar to a whole range of leaders we're seeing around the world, from Donald Trump to Erdogan in Turkey, a kind of a authoritarian hyper-nationalism that plays and exacerbates people's fears in ways that undermine liberal democratic ideals.
Are you completely unsympathetic to the views of the Israeli right, or do you see where they're coming from and simply just disagree?
I see where they're coming from. Look, many people in my own family, some of close friends of mine, are on the right. So these are views that I've been exposed to my entire life. I understand where they come from in Jewish history, and I understand, even though I'm not an Israeli, I think I have some understanding of the experiences, for instance, the Second Intifada or rocket fire from Gaza, that makes Israelis move to the right politically. But I've also spent a significant amount of time with Palestinians in the West Bank, seeing what life looks like for them, living for more than 50 years without basic rights, as non-citizens under Israeli control, without due process, without free movement, without the right to vote. And I believe as a Jew, we have a responsibility to care about the dignity of all people, Jews and non-Jews. It says in Tanakh, it says in the Hebrew Bible 36 times that we should remember the heart of the stranger because we were strangers in the land of Egypt. And that, to me, is central to what it means to be a Jew.
All right, speaking about Egypt, after you wrote about your interrogation, Netanyahu came out saying it was an administrative mistake. But that, of course, wasn't the response when another journalist, Simone Zimmerman, was detained while crossing back from Egypt into Israel and asked about her political views and her views about the Prime Minister. That was just a week before. Why do you believe there was a different response, that Netanyahu said there was an error in your case?
Perhaps because it became a bigger issue in the news, that it became a little bit of a political headache, and that's why the Netanyahu government responded the way it did. But to me, that's kind of represents the problem. I don't want an apology because I have a slightly higher profile than other people, while all these other people who no one has ever heard of, who are much more vulnerable, endure much, much, much greater harassment. To me, the only good thing that could come out of my experience, and look, my experience was not that traumatic. I said in the article I wrote, I was not scared, I didn't feel victimized, but many people actually do endure much, much, much worse harassment. And so if something good could come from this, I think it would be that there would be a broader discussion about the way in which very frequently at Ben Gurion Airport people are targeted for their political views. And it does no good for Netanyahu to apologize to me because it made it into the press. What he should be doing is looking at these policies that victimize so many people so much worse than they did me.
All right. Now, to that point, the Attorney General's office will reportedly be probing the questionable, I suppose, processes that the Shin Bet are conducting at entry points into Israel. Do you have faith in this process?
I don't know. We'll see what comes out of it. But again, for me, the bottom line is that no change really matters unless it also affects the Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims who endure much, much greater scrutiny and harassment often at Ben Gurion Airport than people like me do. I don't want this just to change for people like me because I have the privilege of being American and being Jewish and having some profile in the press. It needs to change for everybody.
All right, just finally, are you surprised that we're seeing this happening in Israel, which touts itself as the only true democracy in the Middle East?
I'm afraid I'm not really surprised. I think that there have been a whole range of things that have been happening in Israel under this government in recent years in which the kind of undemocratic ethos that exists in the West Bank has been filtering back inside the Green Line, inside Israel proper, with a kind of series of efforts, a demonization of journalists, of non-governmental organizations, a kind of a rhetoric that somehow people who criticize are traitorous or hostile to Israel. And again, Israel is not unique. We see the very same phenomenon happening in my country. But I think all of us who love Israel need to struggle against it, because I think to me, it's a fundamental violation of the principles of Israel's Declaration of Independence, which call for a country that will pursue freedom, justice, and peace as envisaged by the Hebrew prophet.
Do you see this as a separate case to Israel's need to keep the country safe?
I think Israel has every right and obligation to keep the country safe from violence. I don't think in a democracy the government has any role in trying to keep the country safe from political views it does not like. And that's what I think the problem is.
All right, Peter Beinart, well, we hope you enjoy the rest of your time in Israel. Appreciate you being with us here on Perspectives.
Thank you.